velvet hour on the borrowed balcony. I used to believe the softest lies were the ones told in kitchens, where steam can make anything look like a blessing. That night my wife stood in our doorway with rain jeweling her hair and said, "I'm late because of the new sponsor dinner." She wasn't out of breath, wasn't frazzled. Just bright the way a secret turns a person into a lantern. I kissed her cheek and tasted wind and a hint of someone else's cologne, citrus washed thin. I'm a bartender. My palate lives on tiny betrayals. This one rang like a glass tapped with a knife. I could have let it go. But at 2 in the morning, my phone chimed with a notification from our car-sharing app, an alert I'd set months ago and forgotten about. The sedan we sometimes borrowed had been checked out under my wife's account for off-site meetings. I opened the map and watched a blue dot pulse outside the Vireo, a boutique hotel that likes to pretend it's shy. The timestamp said 12:41. The car wasn't moving. Neither was I, except for that quiet engine in the ribs that kicks on when the floor moves under you. At 12:49, a text from an unknown number slid onto my screen. "Go to the south alley, not the front. If you want truth, don't pick the stage door. L." I should have thrown the phone in a glass of water and slept. Instead, I pulled on a jacket and walked into weather that felt like the city exhaling. The Vireo sits in a cul-de-sac of good intentions, art galleries, a florist with impossible peonies, a bakery that blurs into morning. I followed the map to the alley. A woman leaned against a brick wall under a busted security light, the hood of her trench half up like a halo someone forgot to plug in. She straightened as soon as she saw me, relief and resolve crowding the same square inch of her mouth. "Your mark," she said, "not a question." "And you're the letter L," I managed. "Is this where we exchange spy gear or we keep each other from guessing ourselves into madness?" she said. "I'm Leela." She jerked her chin toward the blacked-out windows above us. "Room 410 has a balcony. It's around the corner from the main terrace. They forget the split angle reflects. Come on." I followed a stranger up a service stair that smelled like lemon and history. On the 4th floor, she guided me through a corridor thick with expensive quiet, stopping beside a frosted pane cracked open just enough to let in a line of midnight. She pointed to the hotel's central courtyard where a few couples clung to umbrellas and other people. Off to the side, half hidden behind an ivy-draped column, a smaller balcony hovered like a stage wing. They were there. My wife in a dress I hadn't seen before, black silk that made the rain look deliberate. The man from the foundation board, Sam, 3 letters and a fortune, stood close enough to steal her heat. They weren't yet touching. The space between their hands was already louder than my pulse. "If you want to leave, we leave," Leela whispered. She stood nearer than strangers do when they are trying not to collapse. "I thought you should see what this is, not what your head will invent." "How long?" I asked, the syllables like ice in a drinking glass. "Since the charity gala," she said. 47 days. I counted because I'm petty and because numbers make the ocean look like a map." On the balcony, my wife tucked hair behind one ear. It's a move I've loved since the night we met in my bar and she asked for a whiskey neat like she was ordering a future. Sam reached, not for the curl, but for the place where the curl had been. His fingertips hovered a breath above her skin. She didn't flinch. She looked at him like a door had just opened into a warmer room. I couldn't listen to their mouths. I listened to their bodies. Her shoulders dropped a half inch, a surrender to gravity I recognized from mornings when she'd lean against our counter and let me cage her with my arms. He stepped closer and the umbrella shifted so their faces were dry and the world was. When he kissed her, it was not a question. It was the answer she'd memorized. I stepped back. The corridor carpet had a design that looked like vines but felt like a tide. Leela steadied me with a hand on my wrist and didn't apologize for touching me. Her palm was warm, the kind of ordinary mercy that keeps a man from smearing himself across the nearest wall. I looked at her then properly. Dark hair pinned with two silver clips, an elegant mouth unhelpfully honest about what it had practiced saying and didn't. She wore no ring. The absence didn't feel like an invitation. It felt like a border. "We can stand here until the weather changes," she said softly, "or we can decide what kindness looks like next." "Why did you text me?" I asked. "Why not burn it down alone?" "Because I'm tired of being the only witness to my own humiliation," she said. "Because no one deserves to be gaslit by a polite calendar. Because when I confronted my ex a lifetime ago, I did it with only my rage, and all it gave me was an echo." We left before they did. The elevator hummed like a throat clearing before a lie. Outside, the rain came straight down in clean lines. Leela stood with me under the awning, watching it shear off the streetlights. "Do not text her tonight," she said, voice even. "Let the story end before you start yours. Sleep. I'll send you a number for a lawyer I trust if that's where this goes." "Is there a version," I asked, "where this goes anywhere else?" "There's always a version," she said. "Sometimes it's just not the one you can live in." Back home, my apartment received me like a friend who doesn't ask how you are because the answer is obvious. I sat at our kitchen table and lined up the salt, the pepper, the little plant she always forgot to water. I considered rage, drama, theatrical exits. Instead, I fell asleep in my chair with the light on like I'd left myself a lighthouse. Morning came with the smell of rain on hot pavement and the soft thud of my wife dropping her bag. She walked in like a woman who'd climbed a ladder and decided to own the view. "You're up early," she said, pouring coffee. "How was the Vireo?" I asked, and watched her pupils perform the smallest theater on earth. She set down the mug. I didn't realize how steady a hand could be until I saw mine shake. "Are we doing this with grace," she asked, "or with fire?" "Truth if you have any left," I said. "We can dress it later." She looked at me the way a person looks at a photograph of herself from a time she believes she was kinder. "I didn't go looking," she said. "It surprised me. It made me feel like something without a to-do list." She blinked hard, not to hide tears but to squeeze the right words out. "We're affectionate, Mark. We're good. We haven't been alive. I wanted to feel chosen again." "You were," I said, more gently than I wanted to be. "You were chosen every morning. You just stopped noticing." Silence. The kind that puts a hand on your throat and squeezes exactly once to make sure you know who's in charge. She put both palms flat on the table like she was bracing for a wave. "I could suggest we open the marriage," she said. "Some people make rules big enough to hide in and call that honesty." "I don't want a treaty," I said. "I want a marriage or a clean end." She left for work. I left the day to run itself and walked to the river until the city's spine made sense again. When my phone buzzed, it was Hannah. "Layla, are you breathing?" "Barely," I wrote. "Meet me," she answered. "The museum steps. Noon, safety in daylight and tourists." She was right. We sat where the stone warmed slowly, our shoulders near. Our conversation pointed away from the thing between us that had started like a rescue line and now hummed like an exposed wire. She wasn't wearing the trench. A navy dress skimmed her knees and her knees undid me without trying. Not because they were on display, but because they weren't. Restraint is its own kind of siren. We compared notes without turning them into spears. We told the harmless history of our marriages as if recalling houses we'd once lived in. The way the windows stuck, the neighbors' music, the soft spot in the floorboards we kept stepping around. When she reached for my hand to underline a joke, The contact sent a current up my arm that felt suspiciously like hope. "Last time I did this," she said, making a face at her coffee, "I rushed revenge and called it healing. Not doing that again." "You're thinking we take dignity to lunch before we introduce it to desire," I said. She smiled at the corner, a little secret flex. "Exactly that." We didn't kiss that afternoon. We traded revelations like recipes, nothing measured but everything useful. Before we parted, her fingers slipped under my wrist where the skin is thin. She turned my hand gently and traced the faint white line I'd earned slicing limes my first week behind a bar. "You mend," she said, simple as weather. Hannah and I tried a version of mending that involved a counselor with kind eyes and a couch that encouraged confessions. For a few weeks it felt like learning a new language that had the same words but different stress. We wrote rules on paper. We made dinner at the table again. We touched more. One evening, she threaded her arms around my neck while the sauce reduced and swayed us softly like we used to. Her cheek against mine was still a homeland. I kissed her, slow and deliberate, because the body's history deserves respect, even in a country that might be closing its borders. She kissed back with that ache that means either welcome or goodbye. "Tell me we can be brand new," she whispered into the hinge of my jaw. I could have said it. It would have tasted like sugar. Instead, I heard the rain again, the balcony, my own quiet, and said what was true. We can be honest. Sometimes that's all brand new is. We signed papers in a luminous office that smelled like eucalyptus and endings. She cried in a way you envy even as you break, cleanly, without apology. I didn't. I was all out of water that wanted to leave my body. When it was done, we hugged, not as a couple who might take it back later, but as two people grateful for the part of the story that didn't require cruelty. That night I texted Layla and asked if she wanted to see a view from a rooftop that never made a tourist map. She came in sandals and an expression that said she knew what she was walking toward but wasn't going to make it embarrassing. We climbed the fire stairs of the bar where I work, midnight pressing its palm flat against the glass. The city spread itself below us like an argument I didn't need to win. "It's beautiful," she said, stepping to the edge. Wind lifted her hair and I watched the curve of her neck like a man who had finally earned the right to look at a thing and not apologize for the seeing. "Are we allowed to be?" I said, standing behind her, both careful and reckless. She leaned back just enough that her shoulder found my chest. "That's the only way I want to be anything now." When we kissed the first time, it was not a rescue and not a sin. It was consent and warmth and the relief of not standing alone in a room you've paid for too long. My hands mapped the honest geography of her back through cotton. Her fingers threaded my hair. She smiled against my mouth because smiling is what you do when the kiss you're in is finally the one you meant to give someone. We stopped before heat replaced judgment, eyes still close enough to blur. "If we go home together tonight," she said, clear, "it won't be because we're running from anything." "We're not," I said. "We're running toward." We didn't take off our clothes. We took off our armor. We lay on my couch and watched a black and white movie with the sound low and the windows open like a dare. Her calves were cool against my shins. My palm found the place beneath her ribs that fit it. We fell asleep intertwined and shameless, the kind of sleep you only earn after telling the truth for several days in a row. The morning was ordinary in a way my heart hadn't been given in a while. She stood at my counter in one of my shirts, hair a gentle riot, drinking coffee and reading the labels on my spice jars like they might contain headlines. When I kissed the notch of her collarbone, she laughed low in her throat, and the sound put spring light in the ugly parts of winter I'd been carrying. "We are not a fairy tale. We are two divorced people who text about groceries and sometimes leave toothbrushes at each other's places and argue about music in good faith. We are the promise that came after the storm, not the reason for it. Some nights the city puts on its wet jewelry again, and we stand on my tiny balcony and let ourselves be looked at by anyone who cares to. I kiss Leela like a thing I'm grateful for, not like a crime I am almost brave enough to commit. She kisses me like a decision she keeps making on purpose. Sometimes when I wipe the bar at close and the place is all lemon and low, I think of that first night, the borrowed balcony, the reflection that betrayed the performance. I don't hate the memory. I don't worship it either. It's a mile marker. Past it, there was a turn I had to take if I wanted my life to lead anywhere but back into itself. Hannah and I text now and then. Once she sent me a photo of the dog she adopted, ears like question marks and an expression as sincere as hunger. I told her he was perfect. She wrote back, "So are you." It didn't land like a hook. It landed like a benediction. I wish for her what I found. Someone who will press a palm to the small of her back at the crosswalk and lead her into a green light without claiming it's their light. What I know now is simple and worth exactly the bruises it took to learn. Intrigue is not the same as intimacy. Risk is not the same as courage. And the body knows when it has finally stepped into a room where it can exhale. On my balcony at the velvet hour, Leela leans into me and the city flickers like 1,000 tiny apologies. We let it speak. We don't need its permission. We already chose each other. We choose again tomorrow.